in Spanish, but those should really be Thai and Bahasa. The options didn't pop up in the back end for us as we were assigning the interpreters, but hopefully those interpretations are helpful for everyone. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today for this conversation about the Women's Empowerment Principles, or the WEPs as they're known for short. We're really hoping that you can leave this session with a better understanding of the WEPs, including the principles themselves and how to become a signatory, and why it's beneficial for you and for your businesses to sign up to the WEPs. And then for those of you who are already existing signatories, we hope you can have a better understanding of some of the resources and tools available to help you allow you to advance gender equality across the workplace, marketplace, and community. Throughout the webinar, please do feel free to write your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and at the end we'll address them verbally if we have time, and if not, I'll be responding to all the questions throughout the webinar today. To get us started, I'd like to quickly introduce the two teams that we have calling in today who focus on the women's empowerment principles. From the UN Global Compact, we're joined by Cynthia Muffa. She's the head of Human Rights and Gender Equality, as well as Lena Al-Kadumi, the manager on Gender Equality and Social Sustainability, as well as myself, Megan Galvin. I'm a coordinator of Gender Equality and Social Sustainability. And then from UN Women, we have Anna Falth, who is the head of the WEP Secretariat. And on that, I will hand it over to Anna to provide our intro remarks.
Thank you so much, Megan, and welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm glad to see so many people from Asia, and that was the intention, to change around a little bit. As you might have seen, this webinar is being held every quarter to answer all of your questions and to engage with you, and hopefully lead you to adopt the women's empowerment principles. And it is an opportunity for you to get your questions answered, and we are here for that. We'll take you through, as Megan said, the 7 principles and showcase some of our resources. But at this day and time, we are being tested by many setbacks. The last few years have really shown that the only way that we can make progress in this world is to work together. The joint collaboration, multi-stakeholder platforms is the way forward, and particularly when it comes to gender equality. Gender equality is the first issue to be hampered by these big setbacks, whether it is in the supply chain, whether it is through high inflation rates, whether it is through the pandemic that we are still living through. Women are the first to be impacted by these different global events. We see it through diminishing or reduced levels of employment. Many women are coming home either because there are no job opportunities, or because there are so many caring challenges in the household, whether taking care of the children because the schools are closed, there's no childcare available, or whether it is elder care or care for sick people. Women are the ones that are taking care of the family and the household and are impacted in this time of crisis. It is also at times of crisis that we see an increased level of violence against women. We saw at the beginning of the lockdown of the pandemic, hundreds of % increase of incidences of domestic violence. When the pressure is on, whether it's financial, political, or social pressure is on, it often leads to increased violence against women. We see that also now with the crisis in Ukraine, that there's an increased level of trafficking, of other forms of sexual abuse of women. So it's really important that when life is difficult, when the economy is suffering, that we keep gender equality and women's empowerment at the center of our efforts. And this is what the Women's Empowerment Principles is all about. This is what we are trying to help the business community to stay focused, make a commitment, start the journey, assess yourself. Where are you on the journey to support gender equality? Because we need to all stay focused on gender equality. It's getting worse if we lose our attention to these issues, particularly in times of crisis. So while we might think climate is the most high priority, or there are issues of other high importance, like the increased oil prices, or the inflation, or the lurking recession, this is the time to take gender equality seriously and to stay focused. So I will leave with that, but just to mention also the ESG agenda as it's growing in importance. This is also the time when investors are looking to see whether they will get return on investment to reduce the risk of their investments. And we have seen that they are paying increasing attention to gender equality because they do see gender equality as a factor to increase the return on investment and to diminish the risk to their investments. So there are many factors to keep us on course, but to just end with one note that together we can do it. So that's why we are convening and coming together as the UN, the business, governments and civil society to this platform to really make this happen. Thank you very much. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Anna. And now I'd like to hand it over to Cynthia to provide some opening remarks before we get started with the webinar.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Anna, for your opening remarks. I won't add anything to that. I think you've captured the sentiment exactly and why we're here and why this is so important. I just want to take the opportunity to welcome all our guests today. As Megan said, it's a really wonderful opportunity to get an overview of the Women's Empowerment Principles and how they can help you provide a strong framework in your companies when you're striving for gender equality. And we are very, very fortunate that we can do this today, and we're very, very grateful for all of you who have joined us. We're also very, very fortunate to have today two companies who are on this journey. Bangchak Corporation of Thailand, who are a recent signatory since last June, and also Mas Holdings of Sri Lanka, who have been WEP signatories for much longer, since November 2011. So they will be able to share with you, the practical application of the WEPs in their company, and you can see their journey and see sort of at the start of the journey and a more advanced journey in the WEPs. So we hope that this is just the beginning of your journey, because adopting the WEPs is, of course, it's a continuous journey, and our role really is to accompany and support you along that journey. So I will keep this short so we can really jump into the webinar, but we look forward to all the questions, and we hope that you can obviously reach out to us today and anytime after this. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much, both. Now we'll go ahead and share my screen so we can really get into what the webinar is all about, the Women's Empowerment Principles. So the Women's Empowerment Principles are a set of 7 principles that were launched over a decade ago by the UN Global Compact and by UN Women to provide guidance to the business community on how to empower women in the workplace, the marketplace, and the community. They're grounded in the recognition that businesses have a stake in and a responsibility for gender equality and women's empowerment. And a bit more practically, they are a set of 7 principles that encourage companies to look across their businesses, understand their responsibilities, and seize positive opportunities for impact. And they're a holistic framework. As you can see from the 7 principles here on the screen, they cover a broad variety of topics such as women in leadership, flexible work, child or dependent care, equal pay for work of equal value, etc. And they're supposed to cover all of these different issues spanning across the workplace, what happens within your own 4 walls of your companies, and when employees actually come to work, as well as the marketplace, your interactions with other businesses and across your supply chain, and then more so in the community, as we all know that employees don't just work, they're active members in the community more broadly as well. And when the WEPs were established, there were only 39 signatories, but today we have over 6,500 leaders who have signed the WEPs CEO Statement of Support and counting. And this clearly shows that companies everywhere now acknowledge the value of actively supporting women throughout their business operations, and that businesses really do have a role to play in advancing gender equality and social sustainability through the women's empowerment principles. So now we can dive into each of the principles themselves. So principle 1 focuses on establishing high-level corporate leadership for gender equality. And this is really important to really set the tone from the top and make sure that gender equality is a priority across the company with top-level support. It also publicly signals that the CEO and the executive team's goals and targets for implementing the WEPs are super public and made at the highest level. So this also spans across the whole company. It's not just the HR department or the DEI department that should be focusing on gender equality, but gender equality should be mainstreamed into the finance department, into the hiring department, etc. This also communicates that gender equality is not just a women's issue, and rather it's a smart business strategy that will benefit the organization as well as all employees, both men and women alike. Principle 2 of the WEPs is to treat all men and women fairly at work without discrimination. And this is not only a moral necessity, but it is also good for business. Having equal treatment between women and men in the workplace translates to better talent acquisition, higher employee retention and satisfaction, increased productivity, and better decision making. And now more than ever with the pandemic, this disproportionate impact on women, like Anna was talking about in her opening remarks, it's super important to treat both men and women fairly at work in this way, as we've already seen the economic gender gap grow from 257 years to 267 years, or just 10 generations in the past year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its disproportionate impact on women, especially in the workplace. And we've also seen that with COVID, fair treatment extends beyond just equal pay and other aspects related to work, but this also includes flexible working arrangements, inclusive workplace culture, gender-sensitive recruitment and retention, among other things. Moving on to principle 3, this principle focuses on employee health, well-being, and safety, both physical, emotional, and mental well-being all included. Of course, it's very important to make sure that there's no sexual harassment or violence in a company, as this can not only be devastating to employees' overall well-being, but can also result in high costs to women in terms of lost earnings, missed promotions, and less productivity and less courage at work. And policies in line with Principle 3 include safety measures against potential physical risks, such as harmful chemicals or materials, as well as preventing against all forms of violence and sexual harassment at work. And then also more of the healthcare side is ensuring employees equal access to health insurance and different needs relating to their health. The next principle is Principle 4, which covers education and training for career development. And it's very important that companies have trainings for all employees. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not just in the HR department or the sustainability department, but across the whole company about how advancing gender equality is good for business so that everyone can be better aligned and around these shared values and help ensure that all company policies and practices are for the good of advancing gender equality. It's also important to have networking and mentoring programs for women employees, especially in traditionally male-dominated fields. And we've seen great impacts from having mentors for women in the workplace, especially as there are so few women in top leadership positions. Then it's really important for these mentorship programs to exist to help women reach those taller ranks in business. We actually do have a platform for WEP signatories called WEPs Learn, and this includes different personal development modules too that can be used by women to advance their professional skills, which I will talk about a little bit more in a bit. Principle 5 then moves the focus of the WEPs principles from the workplace to the marketplace, focusing on enterprise development, supply chain, and marketing practices. And this principle is really supposed to focus on the company's reach beyond its own office. Like I mentioned earlier, big business, when they commit to advancing gender equality, it's not just what happens within their own four walls of their company, but it should then extend to other businesses, their customers and their suppliers that they also work with on a daily basis. So, for example, suggested actions within Principle 5 include removing harmful gender-based stereotypes in all media and advertising to make sure that the company promotes a very gender-inclusive output. Implementing gender-responsive procurement practices. That could also include supporting women-owned businesses across the supply chain and making sure that women entrepreneurs have access to opportunities in business. Helping women, and then also, of course, helping women overcome barriers in accessing financial services and more is very important and aligned with Principle 5. Moving on to Principle 6. Principle 6 then moves us from the marketplace dimension of the women's empowerment principles to the community focus of the principles by empowering women through community initiatives and advocacy. So like I mentioned earlier, employees are living in a community and company policies and practices affect employees as well as their families outside of just the workplace and the business practices that they conduct. So this principle encourages companies to advance gender equality by leading by company example in the community, working with community stakeholders and officials, and using philanthropy and grants programs to support different community initiatives, and just making sure that their association with the WEPs and being a WEP signatory is something that the community more broadly associates with the company with advancing sustainability and gender equality. Finally, the last principle is Principle 7, which focuses on measuring and reporting. And a common theme that we see with our work is that companies often have a commitment in place to advance gender equality, but then they fall short when it comes to actually reporting on their progress. And this is a super important aspect of making lasting impact on gender equality. It's important to have the commitment in place and then have some kind of plan to implement this, and then reporting on progress that the company is making on gender equality. So Principle 7 encourages companies to measure progress on the different commitments, and public reporting holds companies accountable to making this lasting progress. It also highlights the importance of collecting sex disaggregated data to provide a better understanding of how women are differently impacted in the workplace than men. So if you are interested in joining the WEPs and haven't yet done so, it's a super simple two-step process. So first, join weps.org/join, and you'll see this page here at the bottom pop up. And then you download the CEO statement of support. As you can see here from the screenshot of the page, the CEO statement of support is available in a variety of languages there. And then get your CEO to sign the CEO statement of support. Like we talked about with Principle 1, it's super important to have this top level buy-in, and then upload the signed CEO statement of support along with this online application that only takes a couple minutes. And here we have an overview of what we like to call the WEPs journey. So step 1 on a company's journey on the WEPs is to consider signing the principles. I think that's where a lot of you on this call are here today. So hopefully you can learn a bit more about the principles and then move from the consider phase to the sign phase. The sign phase entails the last 2 steps, like I just outlined in the past slide, to really then commit to the WEPs and upload your application. Number 3 is to activate. You become a signatory on this phase. Number 4 is then to engage. And the next slide, I'll talk about some of the resources that we have available to WEP signatories to help them actually really make progress on these different principles and on gender equality more broadly. Number 5 is sustain. It's important once you start making this progress to keep making this progress and keep up with your different commitments to advancing gender equality. Number 6 is then report. Once you've made some progress on gender equality, it is really important to report on this progress, as mentioned in the context of Principle 7 of the WEPs. And then this journey can continue as you reactivate engagement and sustaining and reporting through the WEPs. We've also created this WEPs toolkit that's just a super helpful resource that outlines the different tools that are available to WEP signatories for advancing gender equality across the workplace, marketplace, and community. So you can see here on the left, there's some different guides available, like for example, thematic guides, leaders' insights, ally insights, action and crisis, public policies, transparency and accountability. And then on the right, you can read all about the WEPs and FAQs, signatories in action, different templates of how you can report on progress or make a certain policy commitment, multimedia, and then the WEPs Learn platform as well, which I'll talk about here in another minute. So all of these different tools and resources and guides are super helpful in implementing the WEPs. So here are some more specific examples available to WEP signatories. There's different guides, for example, the one in the middle on how to implement some of these harder hitting issues such as gender responsive procurement. You can also see that we make very timely guides for companies too. For example, the COVID-19 guide over on the left and talking about domestic violence in the world of work and the unfortunate increase of this due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On the far right, you can see WEPs in action. We have different case studies of companies too, and really how they're implementing the WEPs and different good practices you can learn from. This on the bottom left, Equality Means Business, is the WEPs brochure, which is just your guide to everything WEPs. If you ever have any questions about the WEPs, this is an 80-page guide that talks about the different principles, different resources available, reporting, etc. And then if you are interested in reporting, the WEPs Transparency and Accountability Framework is available to WEP signatories to report back progress that has been made on the different principles. And this guide really walks you through the whole process. And then one specific resource we have available that I wanted to mention is the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis Tool. It's an 18-question online survey that's based off of the 7 WEPs principles, and it helps companies really find different gaps and areas of improvement on the WEPs principles. We often hear from companies that the principles, it's great that they're so broad and so holistic and cover so many different aspects of gender equality, but sometimes it can almost be a bit overwhelming of where to get started. So these different resources, namely the tool, can really help a company identify the gaps and areas of improvement to start implementing the different principles. The 18 questions are further broken down into this middle box here and ask for the company's commitment, implementation, measurement, and transparency on each topic. And then once you answer all the 18 questions, you're then placed in a different category: beginner, improver, achiever, or leader, with, as you can see on the right, almost half of companies being placed in the beginner category, because the tool is meant to show gaps and areas of improvement, and it's supposed to be holistic and name a bunch of different options for you to advance gender equality. And we actually recently released a report analyzing the aggregate trends from the WEPs gender gap analysis tool. We release this report every 2 years, just to show different trends across sectors, across businesses, across geographies, across different sizes of businesses, etc. And for the first time ever this year, we also did a regional deep dive. So I understand many of you are calling in from the APAC region today, given the translations and the different and the timing, but you can see on the bottom right here a picture of the Asia and Oceania page of the report that just looks a little bit more trends more specific to the region, including advancing equity in the care economy, which is the theme that we see come up continuously in our work throughout this region. We then, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we do have the WEPs Learn platform for existing signatories, where there's even more tools and resources for companies to advance gender equality and really make lasting impact on the WEPs. So in the context of this action tool, we encourage companies to first take the WEPs gender gap analysis tool that shows different gaps, and then make an action plan based on these identified gaps to really make sure that there is progress made on these gaps identified. And then you also have the WEPs toolkit with more specific guides and templates that can help you fill these gaps identified by the tool. And then hopefully then this leads to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment, as the WEPs were built to do. And then here's just a quick overview of the purpose of having an action plan after taking the tool. It's important to correct past and present forms of inequality and prevent any future occurrence of discrimination and bias, ensure all company strategies, policies, programs, and activities are gender responsive and transformative, so really making change based on these gaps identified. Develop or deepen the understanding of gender equality among all stakeholders within and outside the organization. So like we mentioned, the WEPs don't just cover the workplace, but also the marketplace and the community. And then of course, to track progress in real time to assess where it stands on gender equality. And the tracking progress and then reporting back is such an important part of advancing gender equality. So that was a quick overview of the WEPs principles and some of the tools and resources available to signatories. We have even more available if you are interested in a particular topic or a particular kind of resource. We're happy to share those. And now I'm excited to hand it over to my colleague Lena, who will be walking us through 2 different company examples and a panel of good practices on the WEPs and the tools.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning from New York. Good afternoon to all of our participants. I believe Ms. Thanaju is caught up right now, so I think this will just be a conversation between Ms. Gloita and I. Just to give you a brief introduction on Ms. Gloita, she is an experienced communications expert with a career spanning 20 years leading multinational companies. She is skilled in internal and external communications, crisis management, digital communications, corporate branding, corporate social responsibility, and sustainable development. She is passionate about sustainability and new energy transitions and aptly represents Bangchak, a global emerging leader in the green energy industry. The company's core business, petroleum refining, spans procurement of crude oil from domestic and overseas sources and refining it into various standard products. So welcome, Ms. Gloita. We're particularly interested in hearing about your experience with the WEPs, as your company is traditionally considered part of the male-dominated industry. So I think it's even more important to hear about your experience in driving the WEPs. within BankCheck. So I'll start with asking you about what motivated your company to even sign the WEPs, and what benefits have you seen so far?
Thank you very much, Lina, and thank you thank you everyone for having me. BankCheck started off, as Lina mentioned, as a refinery in the suburb of Bangkok almost 40 years ago. But along the years, we have transitioned ourselves, and today we are covering 5 business groups like marketing, renewable energy, synthetic biology, and also doing some investment in upstream petroleum exploration production in Norway, and also battery electrification. So we moving very much away from fossil fuel, because that's where the world is moving. And in fact, when you mentioned that, you know, this a male dominated company, yes it is. But I myself joined the BankCheck group about 6 years ago, and what amazed me was, even though we were male dominated, we had, you know, a lot of female engineers working in the refinery back then, 30-40 years ago, and they were leaders, they were managers, and also we were working with a lot of stakeholders, and of course they were female, they were ladies, and I think the principle of the company has been, we don't leave anyone behind, you know, be it in terms of sexuality, in terms of inclusive, in terms of the community, the neighborhood, and everyone. So when we have such principle in place, it was quite easy to adopt the WEPs, and it just helps exemplify the importance of, you know, how we want our company to be a leader, that, you know, we can create an atmosphere of equality in our business operations without leaving anyone behind. And we can include people of all genders, and of course give women the opportunity to grow. And now I think all of you will agree that, you know, there's this is on top of mind of the younger generation when they want to choose a place to work. You know, they like to see that this is a place where you have inclusiveness as at the heart of your operation. And of course, you know, it helped strengthen our ESG priorities in the community. So I think that's basically why we joined. But I think it's just, you know, it's nothing new. It's been there. It's only something that helped make it a little bit more official.
Thank you. It's definitely apparent how the WEPs is really aligned with BankCheck's corporate values, and I'm happy that you're already seeing a benefit internally and externally with the WEPs. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about how exactly does your company implement the WEPs day to day, and if you have any plans to scale implementation.
Sorry, I should have mentioned, today I'm in Davos, and I'm accompanying the group CEO for the World Economic Forum, which is a huge thing. And what I was quite pleased to observe was that women empowerment was quite high on the agenda. You know, even though it's not explicitly described there, like every time we have a speaker. You know, like this morning we had a breakfast, and we had a Citigroup CEO who was a lady, and we had another gentleman. He runs a company that had like about 50% of the leaders that were female, and these things were highlighted. So I think this is you know, the world now is recognizing the importance of being inclusive. Anyway, coming back to BankCheck, of course, is how we formalize or officialize it. So we set it as a business policy, you know, that, you know, in terms of human rights, this is what we sees as important. We had the goals set, we had how we would operate when it comes to human rights, and not just us, our stakeholders, our suppliers. They need to be in line with us on this. We set the target, and then of course, we evaluate. And if we do the analysis and we found that this had not been implemented, we would develop a plan to close the gap. Is coming from the top, having it as a policy, setting the target, roll it out, evaluate, and close the gap.
So you talked about the gap. How did you identify the gap? What did you? I know you took the WEPs gender gap analysis tool, but was it the tool that assisted you in putting your finger on exactly what needs to be changed in the organization or improved upon in the organization, I should say?
Yeah. Okay. Normally we do an annual analysis of these targets and how we fare in terms of the results, and for example, of course, I think it's quite general to see companies set target of having this much percentage of women in leadership, or the board of directors, or the number of female in the workforce, something like that. And so what we do is do an annual evaluation or analysis, and then try to close the gap as a team, as a company. The management acknowledged it, and everyone's on board to make sure that we close all these gaps, or there's a plan to close the gap.
Wonderful. Speaking of leadership, I think that there's a lot of value, and as we know, in order for a company to join the WEPs, they need to get the CEO statement of support. So if you have any recommendations for our audience about how what is the most effective way in securing internal buy-in in order to sign the WEPs and also drive the WEPs. We don't just want to sign it. We actually want to reap the benefits, reap the rewards from the WEPs, which you've clearly outlined how it's benefited BankTrack.
I think in our case it was quite easy, because when I went to the CEO and asked him, or even told him that we should join this, he said, why not? It was as easy as that. So I think it's just, as I mentioned, it's just formalized what we may have had for so long, but may not be laid out in such a structured way, or maybe didn't have the policy in place. So it's just the way to communicate, to make sure that it's now understood by all the stakeholders internally and externally.
Great, thank you. Do you have any other advice for someone who's just embarking on their gender equality journey to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community?
Yeah, I think it's just make it natural, because if you force it when it's not natural, things won't happen easily. But just make it natural, and just for me, it's all about a happy workplace, or an engaged workplace, and engaging workplace for an engaged workforce. So we just try to make it a happy workplace, and see, as a management team, or as a group of people who are tasked to do this, what can we do to make it a happy workplace? What if your staff is going to be a mother in the next few months? What can we do to make their lives easier? For example, we have like a baby room, or a breastfeeding room, or a room where my mothers can feel comfortable. And I think it's now quite common in the company, when someone say, I need to take perhaps 30 minutes to be there, and everyone respects that. So it's just a common concept that makes everyone happy, regardless of gender. And again, we have the LGBTQ and everything, just being inclusive and make sure that we don't leave anyone behind, but make it natural. Don't force it. It will come along. May take time.
Lovely, lovely advice. And it's so nice to hear that that you equate happiness with gender equality and with inclusion more generally. I think that's beautiful and a great way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Gloita.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you don't mind, we might take some questions from the audience in case anyone would like to hear any additional information. Maybe we'll give everybody a minute. Gloita, you should reach out to our colleagues in the World Economic Forum.
Okay.
One of our colleagues is speaking today on gender equality, and a lot of our executive staff are there speaking as well.
Will do.
Cynthia, you'd like to ask a question?
Yes, sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gloita. That was really wonderful to hear. And I was wondering, you're recently joined. Have you found that the WEPs are, when you talk about your engagement with the WEPs in your sphere, in your business community, have you found that it's well known that this is, a framework for gender equality? This is something that companies have access to and should be using?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. That's why I accepted this invitation. Even though I'm away and I need to come out of the sessions. But yes, of course, this is something that we would like to promote more. And we can only see the benefits, and that's why I think we should help communicate. But again, when it comes like last year, when we were the runner-up of the category of the WEPs Awards, and the company was really excited because first of all, we are local, we are Thai, and the other two winners were multinational. So to be among those multinationals in this category was quite an achievement and a recognition for a local company, a local Thai company like ourselves. So thank you very much for recognizing us.
Congratulations. I mean, it's all due to your hard work. So thank you for leading this. Anna, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been very interesting, and thanks for joining from Davos. I know it's a very busy time over there. I'm very curious, since your company is, as you explained, a very male-dominated sector and industry, and also within the company, how are the men taking this agenda, and how are they able to also benefit from it? Because gender equality is not only about giving all the benefits to women, but to kind of leveling the playing field so that women and men can have equal opportunities. And so what has been the receipt of this agenda in your company?
Again, I think for me personally, or for us, we try to relate it to a happy workforce. So, how, and of course, the company would want to retain talents or attract new talents. And this is high on the agenda when people look for something in the company. And I think and luckily again, the almost male leadership, they were very happy again. I think it's just because they know that this is something that will just emphasize that we don't leave anyone behind, and we always recognize the importance of each individual regardless of their sex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights, Gloita. I think it's been very enriching to hear about your experience on the ground, and how it's nice to see that Bangchak is a visionary in gender equality and really recognizes the value of an inclusive workplace.
Thank you.
I will pass it back to Megan.
Thank you so much, Lena and Gloita. It was really, really important to hear from BankCheck and all that you're doing to advance gender equality in the WEPs. And like we briefly mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that we are so excited to have BankCheck here today to talk about their experience with the WEPs is also because of how they've taken the WEPs gender gap analysis tool, the resource that I previously mentioned and walked through that helps companies really identify gaps and areas of improvement when it comes to implementing the WEPs. And BankCheck was actually featured in the recent WEPs report that we just released, specifically for their work on advancing equity in the care economy. In the report, we talk about how BankCheck promotes gender equality in the workplace through gender-sensitive welfare schemes, recruitment policies, and then offering the facilities such as breastfeeding rooms, like Goito was mentioning, as well as other health benefits that correspond to the gender identities of their employees. So we're super thankful for your work there and excited to include it in the report. With just the couple last minutes that we have before I hand it over to Anna and Cynthia for closing remarks, I can quickly talk a little bit more about this report and walk us all through it. So as I mentioned, it's a report that's published every 2 years that analyzes the aggregate data from the WEPs gender gap analysis tool. And then for the first time ever this year, we looked more specifically at how the pandemic has affected gender equality and the different impacts and the different trends amongst different regions. It was created together, this report was created together with all the different tool partners. So that's the UN Global Compact and UN Women, of course, as the partners with the WEPs, and then also IDB and BSR. And the executive summary of the report quickly talks about the impact that COVID-19 has had on companies in the past 2 years since we released the last report and how that's really changed some of the data that we've seen. And then it discusses the main takeaway from the report is that while we've seen a little bit of action, on average like 1 to 2% increases across the board from 2 years ago, we really need more accelerated, urgent, and impactful action for companies on advancing gender equality, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's setting progress made on gender equality and the other SDGs back. You can see here a quick global overview. We have almost 2,700 companies that have taken the tool since it's launched in 2017. And like I mentioned earlier when talking about the tool, the average score is a beginner, with almost half of companies being placed in the beginner category. And this isn't something that's meant to discourage companies at all when they take the tool. It's actually supposed to be a good thing, because then there's more gaps and more areas of improvement identified for you to advance the WEPs and implement the WEPs and advance gender equality more broadly. You can also see the scores by region up here in the map, the different top industries, which is interesting to look at that many of the companies using the tool are in traditionally male-dominated industries, like we discussed with BankCheck. And then you can also see the different users by company size. So the majority of the tool users are in a company of over 250 employees, but the tool is meant to apply to companies of all sizes, as are the WEPs. And here you can see the different WEPs results and the different trends that we see from the tool specifically relating to the WEPs across the leadership, marketplace, workplace, and community. The same themes that the WEPs can be broadly divided into, so can the tool. And then we can see all of this great data across WEPs progress. So you can see the average score here bolded at the top for each of these different themes, and then a bit more information on specifics underneath these themes and different trends with that. And also, it's just interesting to note how the marketplace always has the lowest score with an average score of 17 versus 37 in the workplace and leadership and 23 in the community. And I think it's because we often see companies needing more guidance on how to implement these gender responsive procurement practices and marketing practices to be gender inclusive. And that's something that we have developed a couple different resources on the web, as you can see. And then I know the Global Compact is also making this more of a focus on how we can work with companies on the marketplace dimension of the web specifically. And then here you can see more of the regional results, the different percentage of companies who have signed the WEPs, the percentage of companies who advocate for gender equality and women's empowerment in public forums, and then the percentage of companies who encourage their suppliers or vendors to advance performance on gender equality. And then we get into the different regional sections. As I mentioned earlier, each region takes a deep dive into a different thematic area where we really see as a prevalent theme for the region. So for Africa, we look at supporting women entrepreneurs and some data from the tool around this, as well as each region also has 2 different case studies of good practices from the region and how companies are implementing the WEPs and using the tool to advance gender equality, and then even more specifically within the regional theme. And for Asia and Oceania, there you can see Bangchak and how they are specifically using the WEPs and the tool to advance gender equality, and especially in the context of advancing equity in the care economy. In Eastern Europe, then, we look at addressing barriers to recruit women, especially in male-dominated industries, as we've also discussed today. Latin America and the Caribbean, we take a deep dive into ensuring safe workplaces, and this is especially prevalent now with COVID-19 pandemic and the unfortunate rise of violence against women in its context. And then for the Middle East, we can see advancing women's leadership in business and getting more women to ascend to the top of business. And then finally, our last region is Western Europe and North America, where we focus on equal pay. So I'll drop the link in the chat to this report if anyone is interested in taking a closer look at it, as well as the link to the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool if anyone is also interested in making use of this resource. But now, unless there's any questions, oh, I'm seeing one question in the Q&A. I wonder how to get male leadership actively engaged rather than them just seeing the importance of the WEPs gender equality and empowerment. And this is something that is really at the top of all of our minds, especially as so many businesses are still run by males. We really want to get men engaged on the gender equality agenda, as it's not just something that benefits women, it's something that benefits all people, and it's good for business. And actually the UN Global Compact right now is working on an e-learning tool that men can take to advance gender equality and really become allies in the whole gender equality agenda. So we'll be happy to share that with you in a couple months once that tool launches. But now, for the sake of time, I'd like to hand it back over for our closing remarks from both Anna and Cynthia. Oops.
We muted. Yeah.
Now I can hear you.
Excellent. So thank you. Thank you very, very much, Megan. And thank you so much for organizing today. Really, really excellent. And for me, starting new, it was really wonderful to see this webinar, and I can see how useful it is for our new companies and people interested in joining. So it's something that we hope to do more of and deepen this series and be more specific in areas that our companies need. So that was wonderful, thank you. And also heartfelt thank you to Ms. Gloiter from Bangchak Corporation. It's wonderful to see the commitment and to see companies not just signing the WEPs, but truly making it part of their company and seeing the value of it. and for everybody, because as we know, it's not, women's empowerment and gender, it's not just a women's issue, it's for everybody. So it's wonderful to see the impact that it has in the company and as it transforms, especially in a sector that is so male dominated. So it's wonderful to see, and congratulations to Bangchak.
Thank you very much.
And for those of you who have recently become WEP signatories, we hope that this webinar has really given you a deeper insight into how to engage on this journey. And for those who are yet to sign, we hope that this inspires you to make that change, that very necessary change. And we are, of course, available for any questions you may have. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. And we're always willing to engage, always willing to hear more insight into how we can make this journey easier, more accessible. The question I'd ask Ms. Loito is very important, because whilst we're happy to help those who are along the journey, we have to admit that how do we expand that that reach? How do we make it more known that this framework exists, and it's something that is actually good for business, but it's good for everyone. So on my part, and I'm sure on Anna's part as well, we really look to how we further the reach and get as many people on this valuable journey as possible. So thank you very much for that. And Anna, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I'm putting here another resource in the chat. Basically, we did some research last year that showed that companies that have adopted the women's empowerment principles are doing significantly better on gender equality than those that have not. And it dives into some of the reasons, but basically, bottom line is that transparency fosters accountability. So once the word is out there that there is a corporate commitment to gender equality, there's more fire on the people to make it happen and to fill the gaps and to work on this agenda. So it is very, very helpful. I mentioned earlier that investors are increasingly paying attention to this agenda, but there are many other stakeholders, like the consumers. If you're in an B2C company, consumers are paying attention to the brand and what the brand stands for in terms of inclusion and diversity and etc. Talent are paying more attention because they want to work for a company that have a similar value as themselves, business partners and others. And the principle, as we heard from Megan, principle 5 is about the supply chain and procurement. And that is a great strategy to help leaving no one behind. As we heard from Bangchak, is their principle to make sure that no one is left behind. This is a way that we can stretch out our efforts into communities by holding each node in the supply chain to account and make sure that it reaches out to women working in the informal sector, in rural areas, and women living in poverty. So procurement and the supply chain is a great strategy for companies to also make that happen. And finally, gender equality is not very complicated. It is about being empathetic, and we heard earlier from Gloita that it is about paying attention to the people around us. If somebody is pregnant and might have a child soon, or you hear about a father, asking when are you taking the leave, and be there for that person to benefit from the policies. It's about fostering an inclusive policy, working culture that everyone feels that they belong in. And it's about asking the right questions and to be there for each other. On the topic of men, we have our initiative at UN Women called He for She. And we are encouraging men to be an active member and stakeholders of our gender equality efforts. We hold what we call barbershops, allowing men to also feel comfortable talking about gender equality, know what the terminology is, what the questions are, and to learn how to be empathetic to the workers and talent around them. So we encourage everyone to start asking the right questions today. Look around to your colleagues and see how you can be helpful and help contribute to an inclusive corporate culture and environment around you. So I'm very excited to see some have already joined recently, and hope that others will join us very soon. Our email is here on the screen, and please be in touch with us for any questions. And if you have suggestions on industries that we can focus on, particular topics and gaps and challenges that you have, please reach out to us, and we're happy to put our efforts together with Global Compact and host other webinars that can be useful for you. So I'll close it here, and back to you, Megan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And as Anna mentioned, feel free to reach out with any other questions or anything. But thanks. Have a good rest of your day.